Hey folks, you're listening to the Idea Roastery. I'm Herman.
And I'm Jason.
So Jason, I know that you're currently making your own sourdough bread. Can you talk to me about what it's like making bread?
It's the most toil that I've ever had in the last good couple of years, I think. I think what it's really taught me about myself is that I'm very persistent. Maybe it is the love of bread. We did do an episode on bread, so
Yeah.
maybe it is that that's making me strive so much. So I've gone for the traditional sourdough loaf, and I've decided to not use any sort of yeasts or anything like that. So I started off with just, flour and water, just mixing it.
Yeah, hoping that the good goobies land on it and you.
Yeah, exactly. So I started off with just a sort of normal jar, and I put some stuff in, and I was like mixing it together. The first like week was just that like adding process, mixing it, and then you get like this kind of stuff that kind of looks kind of goopy and smells a bit like beer almost in a sense. Then you like actually have to bake this loaf, and then you're mixing it, and then you're different quantities, and then there's a lot of waiting, so you have to like let it rise, and you have to like knead it every now and
Set an
again, or
alarm
you have
to
to.
knead it, 3 hours in.
Exactly, every 30 minutes, and then you've got to wait like 2 hours, and then you've got to like put it into a proofing basket, and then you leave it to proof.
Do you have one of those proofing baskets that have the little ridges?
I haven't gone that far yet because I'm still in this phase where I don't quite know if it's going to be like my all passion or if it's just like a passing fad. And then you bake it, and then it's a flop. So the first, I'd say, 8 or 9 loaves have been a combination of like floppy middle. I've had like just flat, like just like not rising at all.
Or it creates like a very dense bread.
Exactly. It's almost like a focaccia.
Mm.
And it's kind of made me wonder whether the flour is different. And I might have been using the wrong flour because I watched some American YouTubers, and they were like, "Oh, you just use like normal plain flour because it's got enough protein in there." Definitely not the case. I should have just gone with bread flour. But the bread flour I got it says like for focaccias, which I'm like, is that something different? Some of them didn't even make it to the bake phase because it was like too watery.
Hmm.
And so I've finally on this last Saturday, I decided to make a whole wheat one, and just because I had the whole wheat flour and I hadn't been using a lot of it, and it actually came out pretty good.
Well done.
I It's the third recipe I'm on. I did a proofing overnight, and then I baked it in the morning. And the difference was I don't have a proofing baskets per se, but I have got a tin which I used to proof it in, and that kind of kept it in its shape. So I'm quite proud of it, but it's been a lot of sort of repetition,
Trial and
retrying,
error.
and also just feeding that damn sourdough every day. Although I do
Yeah.
keep it in the fridge a little bit more now, but I've been trying to because I spoke to someone and they said like the best is just to buy a starter because it's already like developed over many years of what's it. Um,
It's like a Tamagotchi. You have to carry
it
on
is a little
this.
bit. It is a little bit. But I've read some things, and I've used Claude and ChatGPT to figure out. So I've put like all manner of like things inside of it because apparently like if you get like organic apples, there's like stuff on the side, and you can just like put it in, and it kind of like
Mm.
starts to bring in some of those goobies. And yeah, so I've kind of gone into I've got a whole wheat loaf, and I think the next phase is to maybe try like a half and half. But I've really learned about persistence. I've learned about being, waiting, patience.
I think that there's a lot of patience involved with making bread, absolutely.
Yeah, no. So it's been a good thing, and I've at least learned the basics of it. I think I'm very borderline, like whether it's worth my time or not, because I feel like I'm a busy person. And when it's just, a couple of pounds to just walk down to the shop and get like a pretty decent loaf, I'm wondering if it's worth the effort.
So I think about this that you describe quite often is I've been trying to get into knitting.
Oh no.
Well, it's not get into knitting, but like I've been knitting a little bit here and there. My sister is a knitting queen. Like she has made some of the most spectacular jumpers and blankets, and she's just been like progressively dressing all the people around her in great knitwear, summer shirts. It's incredible. And so I've been working on a scarf. This is my first piece of knitting. I've been working on the scarf for like the last 2 months, and it is very low reward. Is that you can sit and knit for an hour and a half and have done, 10 centimeters of scarf, right? And the same can be said with my leather work, although to a lesser degree. At least with my leather work, I can go into the workshop and I can work for 6 hours and come out with like a reasonably good Indiana Jones hat, right? But it's still like a very large trade-off. I could buy that same hat at the store for significantly less than I, quote unquote, value my time. But it's not about that. It's about having the craft and doing the thing, right? In the modern world, we have access to all of if you have a reasonable amount of money, you have access to all of these things. The reason that people shoot with a film camera is not because that's the only way to do it. They do it for the love of the craft. They like nerding out about the details. Um, and I think what attracts me to both leatherwork and knitting is that it allows me to sit with myself. And I don't want to say be bored, but to be engaged in a repetitive activity and let my mind wander, which I feel is a scarcity in the modern age.
It's also just having that like tactile, different thing to do. I think also is part of it. When you're working with software every day, it's kind of like a lot of mental sort of arithmetic and juggling stuff,
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
just being able to like, even if you're like shoveling snow or like doing like
Chopping
garden
wood.
work, chopping wood. Yeah, that's like the current like fad of people just trying to like clear their mind. Um, but do you think it's like is it the just being bored that is like the thing that's giving you the sort of sense of ease, or is it the actual task? Like, could you get the same amount if you just sat in a chair by yourself and just looked at the wall?
So I think that we're in a very interesting space. You and I are both now firmly into our 30s. And growing up, there were huge stretches of time where we would be, actually bored. Like there was nothing to do. And so we'd have to get creative. We'd have to look around at the world around us and be like, how can we make this world engaging in a certain way? This could be, you know, playing make believe. It could be building a fortress. It could be doing X, Y, and Z. It could be going and wandering around the neighborhood, hanging out with friends, etc., etc. Um, whereas,
Beating beating people up and stuff, like like a bunch of hoodlums.
yeah, poking dead things with a stick,
Yeah,
that kind of
exactly,
stuff.
exactly. Causing trouble, throwing fireworks into like people's into yards and stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like no one ever has to be bored ever again, because if you have a hint of boredom, you can open up your phone and you can find something to entertain yourself, quick sticks. And I think that we're, as a society, or at least certain parts of society, are realizing that like this isn't necessarily how our brains are wired to work. In the same way that like our brains give us a lot of reward for doing heroin, I feel like our brains are optimized for being rewarded with novelty and with new information. And like the excessive part means that we just become desensitized to it. In the same way that we're kind of like desensitized to sugar. We
Mm.
can overconsume sugar, and most of society does. Um, but we then have less shorter attention span. We find ourselves
Mm.
not being able to read a book or sit through a movie or just entertain ourselves without some
Mm.
like super normal stimulus that's always just sitting there, trickling, little videos into our brains.
I think where we see this the most is with kids. I've been hanging out with as you say, we're firmly into our 30s, so you start to meet a few more people who have chillins. Um, and I think there's a big debate with parents, especially younger kids, on whether they should be allowed iPads or not.
Mm.
or whether they should be allowed to use their phones at certain times of the day. And I think it also links back to what you were saying is like, back when we were kids, we didn't have phones and PlayStation. Well, we had PlayStations at some point, but we didn't have like, endless access to like, content, social media, videos.
It's like I replayed Pokemon Blue, um,
Yeah.
probably 10 times. And the thing is, I was actually chatting with my brother about this yesterday. It's like if Pokemon Blue were to come out today, no one like it would be no one would play it because it requires you to be bored enough to figure out where to go next. There's no like direct route. Here's what you need to do. It's just like an open world. You figure out where you go next.
Mm. But then I think there's like Roblox and some of these like building games, which I think are capturing kids' attentions. But it's also like, I think on the other side, I think maybe it's I think being having so much access to all of this information about what's going on in the world has made parents especially like worried to let their kids go out and be bored and like do these things. And so it's almost like a forcing factor of like, well, just keep them inside, at least they're safe, and give them an iPad so they keep quiet.
But we're technically at the safest time in history for children to be playing outside.
Yeah, but I think being able to see all this stuff going on around the world is also, that I think we've spoken about it before in previous podcasts, is like that bubble of influence of like, you see someone in, Australia like having their child kidnapped, and so you almost like intrinsically think about it all the time. But then the negative effect is that, yeah, your kids growing up to like have, this dependency on this like device, and almost to a certain extent, by the time they reach like our age, are they going to even know what it's like to be by themselves for
Mm.
more than like 30 minutes at a time?
Yeah, and the thing is that it's also so interesting to see how this affects everyone. Like, yes, people born after the year, let's say 2000, grew up with a device in their hand from when they became cognizant. But even the boomers have like really gotten into watching TikTok and YouTube Shorts, and
Mm.
it's it's really interesting. And I've seen this in myself. Is I'm an avid reader. I read every day. Um, Generally before going to bed, a little bit of fiction or something like that. And yet I explicitly have like a place in my apartment for my phone where I put it down and I will only use it in that specific part of my flat because if I carry it around my flat with me, every single time that I have like a tiny bit of downtime, I'll whip out my phone just to see what's there. It's
Mm.
like the twitch that's always there.
Yeah.
And so I find uh, it like this started out as not necessarily a rule, but something that I wanted to do is like I explicitly don't have my phone in my bedroom. And I haven't
Mm.
had my phone in my bedroom for years now. And it kind of boggles my mind that people do have their phones in their bedroom and like use them before going to bed, where you're like injecting this again super normal stimulus into your brain
Mm.
right before right before sleep. But even though I am one of those people who is very cognizant about how I use my phone, I still find myself watching a movie and absentmindedly reaching for my phone, and
Yeah.
like looking at my phone during the movie. And I'm like, what's happening? Oh, my attention span is fried. There's cookies. Like if you're
Mm.
trying to lose weight, you shouldn't keep cookies in your pocket. And like we just have cookies in our pocket.
Is it the attention span, or is it the fact that movies have gotten a little bit more boring? Because I think with so many different types of like Netflix, and maybe because we've got so much access to it, it's like you really need something that's like captivating, that you want to kind of watch it. And then also, I mean, this is more from my side. I don't actually have like a TV itself, so whenever I watch something,
Mm,
it's always on like a laptop. So the like watching experience, I feel, is a little bit degraded from if you were at the cinema. And so maybe
yeah.
it's just like the movies aren't that interesting, it's not that like good of a hook, or you just like so used to content that you kind of can predict what's going to go on in the movie.
I've got an 8K TV in front of a couch that's
So
really
quality is not a
comfortable.
problem.
Quality
And
is certainly not the
yeah,
problem. I actually like watching movies at my place more than I like them at the
do you have a
cinema.
sound bar?
I
Is that
do. I've got one of those
Oh
Sonos
yeah,
sound
man.
bars, so it's
Then
like
you're set,
it's
man.
well
You've
set
got no
up.
excuse.
But this actually came up in my conversation with my brother as well, is that, with video games have definitively gotten better, right? Like across the board, game design has improved, graphics has obviously improved, writing and storytelling in games has improved. And like, yes, I remember a lot of games that I grew up with incredibly fondly, but I can't go back and play those games. They're too not well done anymore. Here's a great example. Bethesda re-released The Elder Scrolls Oblivion with updated graphics
Mm.
like a month ago. And I played the shit out of Oblivion when I was younger, right? I spent hundreds of hours in Tamriel just going and checking out all the things and
Putting
fighting
money in the
goblins
bank and
and
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I started playing Oblivion, the remastered one where they did improve the graphics but not much else. So the gameplay is still the same, the stories are still the same, etc., etc. And like an hour and a half in, I'm like looking to do something else. It like isn't grabbing my attention in the same way. And I think the reason is that like I know it takes active efforts to engage with a video game. And I know that I can go and I can entertain myself with a, 20-minute YouTube video incredibly quickly with low commitment. Even though I have 3 hours available to me, I can just like fill it with 20-minute clips, each of them that are going to give me that like little dopaminergic hit. Um, and I am in the process currently of trying to desensitize myself again, sorry, to resensitize myself to this. And so I'm explicitly trying to steer clear of short form video content. I'm making an effort to leave my phone on the other side of the house. And what I've actually found is that right now it's getting cold in Cape Town, so I'll turn on the heater and I'll like just knit in front of the heater with no other media playing. And
Mm.
my mind wanders in a way that I haven't had it wander in a while. Um,
Mm.
it thinks about conversations I've had over the day, or of ideas that I've been mulling over, or this and that, and it actually leaves me with it like so many ideas come to me that I would never have had. So now whenever I knit with a little notebook next to me, so I can write down
Mm.
those ideas, um, and I. I've been thoroughly enjoying that. Similarly, I've been gymming without any music and or a podcast playing, and so I can
Mm.
like engage with the exercises that I'm doing and also let my mind wander. Do you find stuff like that happens to you too?
My mind wanders a lot when I'm doing running because I've recently started to do a lot more cardio, kind of making up for the many years where I wasn't as active. And I'm doing like usually about 30 minutes at a time, like up to 3 times a week. And I really hate it, and I really think it's like the most boring thing in the world. So, but I'm on a treadmill, and you basically have 30 minutes where you're just kind of like doing the same thing. Now I have filled it with podcasts, and in a sense, also I think in my own life, I think podcasts for me are also becoming a bit more like what you said, where it kind of feels educational. It's like a low effort thing to do, and you can kind of fool yourself into thinking that it's like you're like learning something and that's improving you, and it's kind of nice because you're listening to other people talking, like kind of like you would be doing now if you're listening to this. You kind of feel like you're in the middle of a conversation. You kind of get a lot of things from it, um, and so I'm tending to listen to a lot of podcasts, and because the long form is now becoming quite popular, it tends to be that I'm like, spending 30-45 minutes like walking around listening to a podcast. So it is like a bit of I wouldn't say like, I'd say it's like a waste of time, but it's a kind of a different kind of attention grabbing mechanism. But I think maybe going back to your point about video games, I think what was maybe different when we were kids is that there was probably not much else going on, first of all, and at the time the graphics were quite, it was quite different. It was like this computer that had this like world inside of it and was quite impressive. And maybe we've just lost that. And maybe it is a, do you think it's like an age thing that we're now just at a point where we're like a little bit older, we're not as interested, and we've maybe seen a lot of, you know, multiplayer games, and maybe we're just interested in different things, and maybe we just
Hmm.
need something that's a bit more interesting to tackle.
I think it's us that's changed, certainly, because the games are still the same, right? But I think that it's not necessarily an age thing because 30-year-olds, when the first Doom came out, they were into it, right? They
Mm.
were super, super, super engaged with it. Whereas, like, I can't imagine playing the first Doom right now. It would feel clanky and unengaging, and I would rather go and watch a YouTube video, right?
Yeah, but back then it was like the only alternative was pinball.
Yeah,
Like it was like
exactly.
an insane game. Like it was like you could go and like fight your friends. It was like you
Yeah.
know.
And that's exactly it, is that like I feel like we are on almost like a dopaminergic treadmill. You know, the media becomes more available, easier to consume, essentially like more high calorie, right? If we do the parallel between food and media. And as we become more used to high calorie media, over time we develop a stronger affinity towards it and we want higher and higher calorie media. And I think that TikTok is really interesting because they figured out that the highest calorie media is, you know, video clips of 3 to 10 seconds.
Mm.
I don't know how long
And
TikTok
half of
clips
the
are.
screen is like someone going through a maze, and the other half is like, you know, someone talking, and then there has to be like speech text coming up,
Yeah,
and there's almost like an art form in terms of how to grab attention
I
on
was
TikTok.
sat next to a person at the airport waiting for a plane to arrive, and they were on TikTok, and
Mm.
I just got caught up in it. They were just like flicking through TikTok, and I'm there like, ooh.
What's
And
going
the thing is
on?
that like that's I feel like all social media platforms, all content platforms, your YouTube, Twitter, Pinterest, whatever, is they are all converging to TikTok because TikTok figured out how to make digital crack, and everyone wants to be in the business of selling crack. Um, and so there's a reason that I'm not on Instagram and TikTok and stuff because those reels will pull me in, and I see it with other people as they'll be like having a conversation and then they'll pull out their phone and then they're like shut off from the world. They just say blah blah
Mm.
scroll scroll.
I think that's something that's also part of, I guess, it's maybe not necessarily boredom, but like when you don't have people who are just on their phone all the time, there is that opportunity to engage with one another, right? So if you're in a waiting room, like waiting at the dentist, and everyone else is on their phone, it's kind of like you've people have things that they're doing. Whereas I imagine in the past you would like walk in and say, "Oh, how are you doing?" Like, you know, because you've got nothing else to do. You might as well strike up a conversation because everyone's like probably looking around the room. Because why would you be staring at your lap unless you've got
Staring
some
at your
sort of, you
crotch.
know, yeah, unless you're like a programmer, you know.
Yeah.
But I think that serendipity in terms of meeting other people and just engaging with one another is also lost. And where I see it a lot in London is on the tubes, where everyone's like engaged in their phone or they're engaged on their like listening to their pods. There are people who still read books, fair enough to them, but you can get into some tubes, usually in the mornings or in
Mhm.
the evenings, where
S-
there's absolutely no noise. Like
Oh
everyone's just
yeah.
quiet and on their own things. Where, you know, even in, you know, in Africa, wherever you go, there's always like people talking, and like, you know, there's like a lot
Yeah.
more sort of action, but it's just like dreary and tired and quiet.
So let me switch gears with you over here and ask you a related question. Is this a bad thing? So, you know, we're of a generation that grew up with a bit of boredom, that grew up with longer form media, and so we're fairly protective of it. But is it a bad thing that people's attention spans are shrinking?
One of the things I've been thinking about is maybe being able to be bored is something that's only available to people who have, you know, time that they can afford to take, right? I think we are living in a faster paced world, especially now with AI coming out. And maybe that's just our world that we're in because we're developers and closer to the cliff face. But, a lot of, money is coming from people who are able to work in tech jobs, and they are able to, leverage these new platforms. I mean, you do have influencers who are making a lot of money. And if you're able to capture, some sort of trend before others do, it does have the opportunity to propel you in a way that is unseen before, right? You didn't have, back in the day, you would have had to like work for, 10, 20 years before you become like a senior or be able to earn the amount that some of these influencers are doing. And that's also a good and bad side, because I think there's also, as we spoke about last time, there's like a false end of the rainbow that people are always chasing. But I think also the younger generation seem to be able to kind of context switch a lot quicker. But I've never really worked close enough with them to understand
Mm.
whether it's actually like a benefit or not.
So I've
Um,
read a few different write-ups by teachers and university lecturers who are complaining about the inability for the current generation of students to focus, right? Is that like one of them put it that outside of school they're in a in a entertainment surplus. They're chatting with their friends while browsing TikTok but while watching a movie.
mm,
And when they come to school, they're expected to not have all the stimulus coming in and are instead expected to sit in a class and listen to a teacher and do work. And so they are, how it was described in this write-up, kind of like starved of this stimulus that they're used to. They're kind of like, if you're a smoker and you can't smoke, you're like, you really are jonesing for a cigarette.
mm,
And there is that, and then there's also the inability to actually focus on your work and produce, because all good work, and I think I will stand by this statement, all good work requires a person to sit and focus on it for at least a few hours at a time, right? Like good work is not done in 20 minutes sessions. There's
mm.
I I have seen people swear by the fact that they can watch Family Guy on one monitor while write good code on the other monitor, but I don't believe them.
Yeah. I guess the thing is the connection between fun and boredom and curiosity, right? Like as you get older, I think people forget the fact that you can still have fun. And I think maybe it's like people have this. Also, yeah, there's almost like a. You know what memetics is where everyone's trying to like fit in with each other. And so I think when people are on social media a lot, they feel like they have to be mimetic, or they're trying to like become like other people. And so there's almost like, FOMO. Everyone wants to like be like the other people that they're seeing. And so there's less of a sense of being able to do stuff by yourself. And this has always kind of been there. Like people, I think it almost started round about our time, whereas people like, I would never go to like a restaurant by myself. Um, and in the same vein, I think people, that's almost exacerbated now, where people are even worried about being alone by themselves for even a small period of time. And when you're doing things like research, or you're doing like work, or trying to like do something, you kind of tend to have to be by yourself and doing those things. And so almost maybe it's like a mimetic thing where people are like afraid to like do these things by themselves, or like go outside of their comfort zone, because they're worried that, someone's gonna, show them on like Facebook or like Instagram, and it's gonna like blow up, and you're gonna become a loser. And there's almost like a sort of
Mm.
mimetic bullying aspect to it, where people are just like propelled to do these things. And I think it takes a bit of strength to say like, I'm actually going to go in this other direction. I'm going to take some like time away, and I'm actually going to do this thing that I think is important. And I think maybe if you don't have the time to think clearly about what it is that you want to do, or the direction you want to go in, I think people just end up getting carried along into
I
that,
hear you.
world of just, keeping up, like almost keeping up with the Joneses, and like kind of continuing
Mm.
your pathway.
So then to sort of round out this conversation, like hypothetically, what could an individual do about this? Let's assume for a second that actually we should have longer attention spans and we should cultivate intentionality. What do you think would be a good way for people to go about doing that?
And I'm no expert, but finding ways to cultivate that sense of boredom. I think in the way that you're doing it, like trying to like remove yourself from those triggers. I think like also like nowadays, there is, people do tend to need to be a little bit online at least. Like you can't like completely remove yourself because you can't talk about the current events is something that people generally talk about. But I think finding ways to have time by yourself. One thing that I've tried to do is on like one day every 2 weeks, I'd have like a no device day where I try and just like not have as many devices. But it does take a bit of, I think people do meditation as well. That's also like a way. But one of the things I do is like, as you're like walking anywhere, you kind of like see if you can become a little bit more in tune with what you're doing. It's a little bit of more of an awareness thing. But then when you have that spark of like curiosity, like, ooh, I wonder what's down that path, is that you must take that opportunity. And then obviously it requires having time. One of the things I like to do is just go walking around, and then I will like, if I feel like going down an alley, and it's nice in London because you've got lots of different alleys and stuff to walk down. You just like, oh, I wondered what's down there, and you just go down that road, and you
Yeah.
start to learn to be a little bit more like curious and follow that like intuition in a sense.
I do like that idea of like a digital Shabbat, and it's not really something that I've thought of, but having like Sundays be no, I don't know how to put it better without sounding like a nerd, but like no supernormal stimulus day. So it's like,
Yeah,
putting your devices away. The type of entertainment that you do is all slow entertainment, reading a book, going for a walk, um, having a picnic, uh, and things like that, and explicitly not even entertaining yourself in the evening before bed. Instead, you read or you paint with watercolors,
yeah,
right?
or do writing like that, like those kind of things.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that that's actually a really neat one that I'm going to have a think over. But as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I tend to try to leave my phone on the other side of the room,
Mm.
or the other side of the apartment. And I'm also not on social media. Like I don't actually consume any short form video kind of as a rule because I know that it'll get me. I
Yeah.
don't have the self-control to dip in and dip out. Um, in the same way, I don't have the self-control to be like a smoker who smokes
Mm.
a cigarette with mates on a Friday and then doesn't smoke throughout the week. It's like if I'm smoking on a Friday, like I'm gonna smoke on the Monday,
Yeah.
right? And so
It's
I
self-control, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
I like there are going to be points where I don't have the energy to self-regulate, and so I just don't do it at all. I actually even have my ad blocker on my browser has the ability for me to hide certain parts of a page, of a web page. And so on
Mm.
YouTube, I hide all of the suggestions. That entire suggestion bar is gone. And I also hide the unhideable YouTube Shorts sections
Mm. Mm.
that YouTube does that will not give you the option to hide them. So I have to make a
Yeah.
workaround and hide them myself,
Yeah.
which I think is actually very rude of them, but I understand why they're doing it.
Yeah. I think they should. I think my latest thing is they should rename social media to engagement farming, like because I think that's really what it is, and it's almost becoming, yeah, like as you said, you just can't dip in and dip out, and even like YouTube to an extent is like it's able to, and also because it's longer format, it like recommends me these like sort of longer, some guys sailing through the Arctic, and it's like 30-45 minutes, about the same as like like an episode of a series. And I think that's just as bad as the short form because you like I don't know. I guess it's also, we didn't really touch on it, but it's there is a form of escapism, and I think that's why I think it's so nefarious. Is that there are people in the world who are trying to just escape their like lives, or they
Mm.
just don't have other things going on, or they've got like a rough situation, and I think it is quite predatory to those people. And even for me, like, I get like dragged in every now and again into these like, short form contents and stuff. But that's off YouTube. It's not even, I've never touched TikTok because I know it's like, as you said, crack. But
Yeah. I wonder if society is going to change over time. Like, when we started synthesizing cocaine, like companies started putting it in everything. I mean,
mm,
Coca-Cola is the famous example, but it was in lozenges. It was in like I saw a old-timey newspaper advertisement where it was kind of like this powder puff that you squeeze the end and then it generates like a little mist of cocaine for the discerning lady to, just have a cheeky little whiff.
yeah,
And over time, we're like, actually, this, like, humans weren't built to have this much chemical influence on their brains without it causing
mm,
long-term problems in sociability, et cetera,
yeah,
and dependence formation. And I think people are coming to realize that, especially at the extreme ends, like TikTok, is we are having the same thing.
mm,
Like people are spending a lot of time on TikTok.
mm,
I reckon that for people who do consume TikTok, it is measured in the hours per day and not in the minutes.
yeah.
And there are very few other vices that will take up hours of your day every day.
Yeah. And it says a lot that China's like banned people from using it for more than like 2 hours, and or that they like regulate the type of content that is on there.
Yeah.
But I think it also like it comes down to, I think the better approach is more like the self control. I tend to think the awareness of AI as a factor will push people to not engage as much. I've already seen, so I'm quite a lot on X and previously Twitter, um, and I've noticed like there is a trend against people just saying like there's just too much AI generated sort of replies, and it's kind of not really as fun anymore, because then it is like when you've just got AIs talking to each other, it is more engagement farming and not really social media, right?
Mm.
And I think that will, when it gets to a point where people realize that, hey, I might just be in this app talking to all these bots, and I'm just like, like this is not even people, like the people just making money off me, then people will check out of that system. And I, even myself, I'm feeling like I should probably not. I mean, my content is quite, authentic, but maybe I shouldn't go on there. And I think that's going to tend to happen as long as people as long as people see it for what it is. It's like it is like a form of like gambling. It is a form of like escapism, and I think it needs to move into that sense. I know the big tech companies are not going to like that because they're going to say, oh well, everyone's got the right to choose, and there's always VPNs and all this stuff, so it could be banned in one place and you can access it in another. So it's really hard to police. But I think hopefully, AIs will take over and they'll be able to do all the IT related jobs, and then that will force us back into the real world where we'll actually have to like, bake bread and you know,
Mm. I hear you. Like, especially with the new Google generative video,
oh
which
yeah,
is super impressive. I am what has been happening to, deviant art will soon be happening to YouTube. I think a lot of the content on YouTube is just going to be content milled, AI
well,
generated.
even now, so the like I've even when I go onto YouTube Shorts, I'm like quite. I feel like I'm quite like analytical about the type of content, because I've seen how these people are like. There's these, you know, uh, tech bros or whatever they call them, that who are just like creating these like TikTok mega accounts where they've got like multiple TikToks all posting the same video
Mm.
content. Like you can see it. It's usually like it's something that's like a picture, or they'll take like some interesting video that you've seen on the internet before, and you'll have like some AI guy narrate over it, like explaining exactly what's going on. So there'll be like some guy making noodles, and then there'll be a guy saying, this guy is making noodles in a specific way, and they explain what's going on in the video, but it's completely AI generated because they've clipped that video
Mm.
from something like 9gag or some other platform, and then they've put this AI thing on top of it, and it's really addictive.
I actually saw, my mom sent me a YouTube short the other day. And she's like, this is very, my mom's, tech literate. She's turning
Mm,
70 next year and she's still a programmer. Um,
yeah.
and so she sent through to me, she's like, How is this trending on my YouTube shorts? Like, why is YouTube recommending this to me? Because it's so obviously fake." And I opened it up, and what it was is it was a AI generated country music singer who was strumming away on the guitar, a very handsome man
Mm,
doing some country music things. But like his hands aren't even touching the guitar properly. Like
yeah.
the music is coming, but his hands kind of like drifting around. And then it would have that clipped to real clips of like a X Factor judge going like, "Oh my God, oh wow, that's amazing. Ah,"
Mm,
and the crowd going wild. And it's like that is completely falsified content
yeah.
made to look like it's real content. And we don't really have and the fact that it's, trending on YouTube means that a lot of people are watching and being like, "Wow, that man's talented."
Or maybe they are, or maybe it's just like maybe the algorithm's optimizing for like 5 seconds that 5 seconds where it takes you to realize that it's like not fake is enough to like make it into like a popular video. Or as these like engagement farmers do is they'll have multiple accounts and they'll post the same content on like multiple
Mm.
accounts and they've just managed to somehow get into everyone's mindset. But yeah, I think it's an important thing that people I think need to be aware of. I don't think there necessarily needs to be like a big brother government to come and like prevent
I
people from
agreed.
accessing
I
it.
agree.
But I think like awareness about it and yeah, just cultivating that sense of boredom and sense of being by yourself does help.
And I think that the ability to focus in the future is because it's going to be so rare, it will be a superpower. And so
Mm.
if you can cultivate your ability to deeply engage with anything from your work to your hobbies, that you will do really well in a world that cannot.